Okay, so we were creating our control, and I just renamed it, and I needed to freeze the transformations on it so that it's zeroed out. Okay, that's important. That way if the animator ever needs to they lose control of the toothbrush, they can just zero out its translate, rotate, and scale attributes. Well, when you zero out scale attributes, that means set them to 1. That will make it so that it puts it back into a location where they know they can find it. Okay, because sometimes they just disappear. So if I go to Modify, Freeze Transformations, and I want to freeze the Translate, Rotate, and Scale. That's if I clicked on the option box. So if I went to the option box, I can get to those settings. I'm going to just click on Freeze Transformations, and I see that Translate Y attribute now says 0. Okay, now I need to hook up all those parts together so they'll follow this control. So I'm going to go to Window, Hypergraph Hierarchy, and here's my four things that I've created so far. I've got a toothbrush, bend, handle, squash one handle, and toothbrush control. Well, the first thing I need to do is rename this bend one handle to toothbrush underscore bend handle. I'm going to copy that so I don't have to retype it. So if I control double click on a node, it allows me to rename it right here in this editor. Okay, now I need to parent all 3 of these to my control. So I select all 3 of them, and then I middle mouse click and drag them to my toothbrush control. Okay, so now if I grab this controller, I can move this around and it stays deformed without going all weird on us. Okay, so I'm going to undo that, get it back to 0. Now we don't want our animator to select our toothbrush itself. We want them to have to use our controller to move around our toothbrush, because as riggers, we're control freaks. Okay? Well, basically what happens if they grab the model, they'll start animating vertices, and then all kinds of weird stuff happens. So we don't want them to select those. So what we can do with your toothbrush geometry selected, if you press Control A, you can go to the toothbrush GeoShape tab, and you want to go to the Object Display section, open it up, we go to Drawing Overrides, subsection, Enable Drawing Overrides. You want to change the display type to Reference. What this is going to do is make it so they cannot select it. The only thing they can select now is the control. Okay? Now we don't want them to have to dig too deep to control the bend or the squash of our toothbrush. So what we're going to do is we're going to give them some custom attributes. I'm going to switch back to the channel box. There's a couple ways to do that. You can press Control A again if you have the attribute editor, and it'll open up the channel box. And we're going to create some custom attributes on this new toothbrush control that we created. The easiest way to do that, and the only way that I'm going to show you, unless you ask for other ways, anyhow, is by selecting the control, and then you go to Edit, in the channel box menu, Add Attribute. The attribute that we want to add is called Bend. And typically attributes start with a lowercase. They start lowercase. And if you had more than one word in it, it would be what we call camel case. So the first word would be lowercase, and then the second one would be uppercase, and you would just run them together. without spaces. Maya does not like spaces in its names. If you do it, if it allows it, you will have problems. Okay, so if you like spaces in there, use an underscore instead. Anyway, so we got bend. The type of data type that we want is float. Our minimum is going to be -10. Our maximum will be 10. And our default will be 0. And then I'll click add. Okay? After I do that, I can come over to my channel box and I can see I have this new attribute called bend. I'm going to do the same thing for squash. So I'm going to call it squash. And again, I'm going to do a minimum of 10, or minimum -10, maximum of 10, the default is 0. I'm going to click add. And now, we may want this toothbrush to bend to the side. Now, it may need to bend in more directions than just forward and back. So let's add another attribute called bend direction. Spelling looks weird to me for some reason. Okay, so we're going to do a minimum of 0, maximum of 360 for 360 degrees of rotation. Okay, and then we'll click. Actually, yeah, we'll do that. We'll click OK, and now I've got 3 new attributes. One's called bend, squash, and bend direction. Now, these attributes, they don't do anything. So we need to hook those up. So to do that, we need to select our deformers here. And we're going to go to the Window, Hypergraph Connections Editor. And then when we get in there, you're going to see more nodes. Okay? The node that we saw in the hypergraph hierarchy is the transform node for those deformers. But the attributes that we need the animator to be able to control are on the bend 1 node and the squash 1 node. So I'm going to select the bend 1 node. I'm going to go to Animate, Set Driven Key, Set, and by having the bend 1 node already selected, it automatically loads that into the driven section of this set driven key. Okay, and I have my only attribute that's unlocked still on that node, the curvature. So now I need to load my driver. So I select the toothbrush control, and then I click load driver in my set driven key window. Now I need to connect the bend attribute on my toothbrush control. I need to connect that to the bend 1 curvature. Before I do this, I need to make sure I set my curvature to 0 so that I have my default keyed first. Okay. Now this is the place everybody messes up when using set driven keys. You have to have a driver attribute selected, and you have to have a driven attribute selected. Okay, so I got both of those selected. It highlights the key button, or enables the key button. I click key. Okay, so now I can click on the toothbrush underscore control in the driver section, and it will select that node. So that's kind of nice. I'm going to change my bend attribute to a +10. Then we select my bend 1 node, and I'm going to change this curvature, which now is red, which means it's keyed. And I'm going to change it to whatever I think +10 should be. So I'm going to make that positive be forward. So I'm going to say that's the most it should ever bend. It's about right there. Let's do it a flat 120. Okay. Now I double check, make sure my bend attribute is still selected and my curvature attribute is still selected on the respective nodes, and I click key. Now if I go back to my toothbrush control and click on bend, I can middle mouse click and drag, and I can use this